Hi, my name is Stephanie Mizuka, and I'll be talking to you today about some of the study designs that are available for answering your D&I research questions. Throughout this presentation, we'll go through a couple different types of examples and talk about broad categories of designs to give you an understanding of the breadth of designs available to you in your toolbox. So there are two big categories of research designs. The first is from Brown, a review in 2017. And with this one, he describes research designs in terms of within, between, or within and between site comparisons, depending on what type of contrast you're trying to make. Separately, Curran has introduced this idea of hybrid designs that help us think about D&I along the continuum of effectiveness to implementation research. One example of a within-site design would be an interrupted time series. And here, researchers collect multiple points of data over time, and then use that to understand the effect of a dissemination or implementation effort that occurs over that time period. So for example, if you were trying to understand the impact of a policy mandate, you could look at compliance with that mandate before and after the policy mandate went into place, and look at the slopes of the interrupted time series graph before and after to understand if there was an effect of, for instance, a policy mandate. An example of a between-site design would be something like a factorial design. And here we're thinking about combinations of implementation strategies, each having a couple different levels or categories or types. So here you would have something like in-person versus virtual training for providers, or changing the frequency with which an implementation strategy is delivered. And what you would do here is put this into a 2x2 or a 3x3 table, depending on how many levels you have. And you would create, in the 2x2 example, 4 unique groups to have each of the combinations of the implementation strategies, and you would randomize sites to one of those 4 conditions. And here it's really helpful because you can understand both the individual impact of that implementation strategy each, and then their combination, knowing that many of our implementation efforts takes more than one strategy to be successful. A variation on this is the incomplete factorial design, where you just take out one of those 4 groups. Say this was a no treatment condition, as it turned out with your combinations, and you knew that doing nothing did nothing. You could exclude those and just focus on the other 3 conditions. Another type of between-site design would be what's called the SMART design, and with this, you're using randomization at multiple points throughout your study, so not just at the beginning. And what's nice about these is that you can assess whether changes are happening throughout the course of your design or of your study, so you don't have to wait till the end to understand if something is successful or not. So if you assess whether people are responding to an implementation strategy, you can see who isn't, and then perhaps randomize them to either receive more of the same, so allowing more time for the effect of an implementation strategy, or you can randomize them to a different sort of implementation strategy. Perhaps they need something and then a different implementation strategy to be successful. An example of the within and between sites design would be what's called the step wedge design. And this is one type of a broader category that's called roll-up design. And what happens here is that an implementation strategy or an intervention is allocated over time. So you group sites or people into different groups, and those are randomized to the time at which they receive the intervention or D&I strategy. So it's not that some people get something and some people get something else, but everyone gets things just at different times. You measure along each transition as groups come into the intervention period, so that you can assess those really nuanced changes. And this is particularly useful for going to communities and pitching them your study design and getting them on board, It's not that you're going to go to them and say, you might get something, you might not, but it's just a matter of time with the case of the stepped wedge. And last but not least, that separate categorization scheme coming from Curran. These are the hybrid designs, which place us kind of thinking about the D&I research continuum, going from clinical effectiveness research through implementation research. And Curran specifies these 3 different types of hybrid designs that move us from effectiveness to implementation research. So in type 1, we're primarily doing effectiveness, but also gathering some preliminary implementation data as well, moving sequentially more towards full-blown implementation research. And this helps us acknowledge that we can be thinking about implementation research questions even when we don't have effectiveness data fully teased out.